Okay, well, welcome everybody. And I know we're having a nice little conversation before we started, but you guys who are seeing the recording don't get to hear that. Too bad for you. So you'll have to join in. Anyway, so let me go over some of the news from this week in solar to get us all started. There was a new report just issued called Shining Cities 2022. Which was interesting because they talked about the highest concentration of solar in cities across the United States. And no real big surprises. The top 5 cities for solar per capita is number 1 is Honolulu. Number 2 is Las Vegas. Number 3 is San Diego. Number 4, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And number 5, San Jose, California. So those are the highest concentration per person or per capita. The highest by volume is Los Angeles, just big city. San Diego is number 2. Las Vegas is number 3. Honolulu, number 4. And San Antonio, Texas is number 5. So obviously desert Southwest out there in the West Coast is where the big concentration is. But they did mention that as of now, the end of 2021, the US has 121.4 gigawatts of solar installed, which is enough to power 23 million homes. So getting very substantial there. Obviously not all of it's residential, but that's a lot. In fact, they said that the top 9 of the top cities had more solar installed than the entire US had 10 years ago. So it's accelerating quite dramatically. Little did we know, this is actually Solar Education Week. We're right in the middle of it, so consider yourselves educated. But if you want to see what's going on elsewhere, go to solaredweek.org. They've got a lot of different events going on, virtual and in-person events during this week. Some of them I looked through, there was like solar yoga. I don't know how you do virtual solar yoga, but that was there. Solar ovens, different movies, a lot of lectures. So if you want to go into that website, see what's happening, that's good. Maryland just set some net zero goals. Their new goal is net zero by 2045. It's under a new law called Climate Solutions Now Act. And their interim goal is 60% reduction by 2031. And a lot of their focus is on net zero schools and also funding for low to moderate income solar projects. So that's happening in Maryland. In Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin just signed a property tax exemption bill for solar up to 25 kilowatts. So if you install a system, it will not add to the property tax of your home. So that's a nice little exemption, although my property tax guys don't ever come out to our property, so they wouldn't know if I have solar or not, or water or roads, you know. All right, Tigo just announced they've got an interesting new product. It's a smart junction box, which I found this thing kind of fascinating, and this group would appreciate it, I think. You know how because of rapid shutdown, pretty much every panel on a building has to have some sort of electronic device attached to it. So we've had power optimizers, we've had microinverters. Those all have the rapid shutdown device built into them. But Tigo has a series of devices that are just simply for rapid shutdown. So when the grid goes down or you turn off the system, it turns off at the panel so that firefighters are not electrocuted by wires that are charged when the sun is shining, but they've disconnected it from the grid. Well, now, rather than having a device attached to each of these panels, Tigo has a junction box that has multiple rapid shutdown devices incorporated within the junction box. So every time you connect into it, you're now connecting to a rapid shutdown device, which makes sense. And I suspect at some point they'll have just one single device that connects to each of those units, each of those panels. a team at the University of Surrey in the UK, they've found a way of using what is biomimicry, basically, to increase the solar panel efficiency by 25%. And what they've done is, apparently the wings of butterflies have a honeycomb type lattice surface that captures and avoids the reflection of the light. So they've incorporated that lattice structure into the top of a solar panel, which then reduces the amount of reflection off of the solar panel, and thus allows it to absorb more sunlight. So that's always kind of interesting. It's sort of like Velcro was designed by somebody figuring out sand spurs wouldn't come off of your pants when you walk through a field. So biomimicry is interesting. And then, of course, we've heard this before a little bit, but a report, night generating solar panels are a thing in the lab. And what this does is takes the temperature differential between the cell panel temperature and the ambient air temperature. So at night, as the world cools, there's no sunlight, the panels tend to cool down faster than the ambient air temperature. And that temperature differential can be harnessed to create electricity. At the moment,
Jay,
very small amount. Yeah.
it's just like that's just a thermoelectric layer or a thermoelectric device. It has really nothing to do with solar then, is it? It's just something they're adding to a solar panel?
Yeah, it's something though that they said they can add into a solar panel at very low cost.
Okay.
And it does not interfere with the functionality of the panel as it exists. And when I was reading it, it was a little bit confusing, but it looked like they can take the temperature differential between the top side of the panel and the bottom side, and also generate additional electricity during the day. So they can enhance its efficiency during the day by adding that thermal differential. And you're right, it's a different device, but it's incorporated into the panel. But then they can use those panels to generate electricity at night the same way. I suspect at the moment, the cost is going to be much, much more than the energy produced, but it's interesting. It's a concept.
How much is it? I'm just curious. I've got on the top of one of my wood stoves, I've got a little fan that runs to circulate the air based on one of those.
Yeah.
But it just makes enough electricity to, you run the fan to move the air. It's not like it generate any significant amounts.
Yeah, I think we're talking very small amounts of energy at the moment. If my memory serves, they were saying it would take like 20 square meters to run a light bulb. So that's not much, but neither were solar panels when they first started out. So that was an interesting concept, I thought, and it's something that we'll see developing. Yep. Hey, Dennis, are you trying to talk? You're on mute there. You talking to us or? I can't tell if Dennis is talking to us or somebody else. All right. Okay, anybody have any comments on the news there? Okay, anything else you want to bring up for the good of the cause before I jump into my discovery here? And
Jay, Devon.
Yeah, Devon.
I just want to query. So recently, when we import inverters into our country, one of the requirements that is now coming up is that we are supposed to get the test reports from the manufacturers for the inverters. Before it wasn't a requirement, they would just ask for the safety certificates, the certificate of conformity, but they want the full test reports now. Now, in reaching out to some of the manufacturers, they were told, of course, these are classified documentations. They don't really give these things out. Is this something similar that happens in the States, or is it something?
Did you say this is just for inverters?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's not something that's a standard practice in the US. What they typically say is it must conform with either UL 1741 or UL 1741 SA, which is the supplemental amendment, depending on the jurisdiction. But I don't know what else they would really need to know. If it conforms to that standard, then look at the standard and it conforms, you know? So.
Well, actually, out of St. Vincent, I was engaging with a 200 kilowatt grid tie system there. But the utility company in St. Vincent also asked for the test reports for the inverters to be used, were proposed to be used on their installation. So it's just something I just trade out here. I just trying to get some more information, you know.
Yeah,
but as I said, I did reach out to the.
I would suspect you could get that from UL if it's been tested, you know, against either ETL or UL as the testing lab that likely the inverter manufacturer submitted it to. It seems kind of redundant, but you know, if that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, Dennis, were you trying to talk to us or were you talking to somebody else? You're still muted according to my thing. I still have you as muted. You gotta click down at the bottom left. There you go. There you go.
Unmute. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
All right. No, I mean, if they're going to do it at night, why not do it in the morning? The temperature difference is a lot greater in the morning.
I think
when
that's
the
all.
panels-
Yeah, it would run.
panels start
It would run all
melting.
day long for those temperature differentials.
Yeah, just a great idea. I mean, because those panels, I mean, I've seen them 126 degrees, you know, and the difference to the roof is, you know, like 80 degrees.
Yeah.
That's a big temperature differential. That's a lot of energy right there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I guess conceptually, it's not that much different than geothermal, you know,
Right.
where you're able, I suspect there's some way you could like geothermal, you know, expand or contract that differential. So.
Yeah, you could use that energy. There's a lot of energy, you know, energy's potential, you know, whatever is one side to the other side is potential, right?
Yeah.
You know, you got 50 degrees in between. That's where you're making energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
so I think the night side sounds cool, but I think the early morning side has a lot more potential.
Yep. And also when they're covered with snow, you can even get some energy out of it. That would be nice. Like this morning. So.
Yeah. You're way up there. Oh, well, no, you're in Ohio, aren't you?
Yeah, but we had some snow this morning, which really messes with my mind. So
I think what he's suggesting is that the benefit of solar energy can be harvested by silicon-based conversion and by thermal differential between the object it's shining on and the object that it's shading.
yeah, and that's kind of the idea behind those night panels, and it'll be interesting to see because, you know, one of the things you find as you research this stuff is energy is just everywhere. You know, the question is, can you harvest it in an economical way? And so as we're starting to expand in the world of solar, I was just, in fact, for the level 2 textbook, researching all of these innovative new technologies that are out there. And it's amazing how when you look at the Shockley quasar limit, currently it says that with the traditional type solar panel, we can only get to about a 33% efficiency. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, essentially they call it what, black box radiation or whatever. It's everything generates heat unless it's at absolute zero. And so you lose a certain amount of the energy of the sun just in the fact that the entity, the panel or whatever, is radiating heat. But then there's also the fact that it can't absorb within only just a fairly narrow bandwidth of visible light. And so what they're trying to do is say, okay, well then how can we increase this efficiency beyond this 33% limit that seems to be out there with silicon and the way we make these things? So one option is to concentrate sunlight into a smaller space through concentrated solar, like parabolics or whatever. Another is to begin to expand that wavelength, the form within the electromagnetic spectrum where you can absorb energy. And that's another with multi-layer thin film panels that are starting to come in. But then other concepts are, do we change from silicon? Because silicon is that substance that has that restriction of absorption. So we're getting,
Gallium, whatever, yeah.
we're getting lots of these new innovations.
Well, here's one thing. Why not put some water tubes underneath the solar panels and run so you can run hot water into your house?
They actually do have that. There are some systems like that incorporate basically solar thermal with PV solar, and then the cooling effect of the water actually enhances the production of the solar electricity. But once again, you're getting into what is the expense, what are the issues? You've got pumps, you've got other things.
People run hot water under their floors in their bathroom.
Sure.
Come on. Let's just use the hot water. I mean, dude, you know what those panels get up to? Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're 130 degrees. That's a lot of hot water.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
People
solar
are doing that.
thermal, solar thermal is very efficient. It can be up to 70% efficient. So
Yeah, that's old tech. I mean, people been doing that. My great uncle used to do it back in the 70s because he was cheap, not because he was.
Well, just throw it on the bottom of the panel and you just plug them in like you do the panels.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
You just plug in a little hose just like you do on the panels.
Yep.
Mhm.
All of
It's
that's
really
doable. All of it's doable. The question is it doable at a cost that's cheaper than the alternative? And whatever that alternative is. So. All right, I see everybody freezing up, so I'm gonna put this here in case. Go ahead. Am I the one freezing?
Going down, Jay.
Yeah, I'm gonna create a hotspot here because the college's internet is apparently. Let's see here. Be patient with me just 1 second. All right. Come on.
You already heard me.
All right, I'm back.
There you go.
All right, yep. Good thing about being in America where we have no internet. So, all right. Yeah, let me jump in. Did anybody else have anything other than you're running a hose on your roof with your solar panels at the moment? So
I wanted to talk about something I seen the other day, which I wish to explore. But I wonder if anybody else has already seen it. The concept that this guy was promoting was that at peak times when you're producing a significant amount of energy from your solar, and what he was saying we should do is he creates another system using water. And what he was doing is pumping while you had the solar energy at peak producing more energy than necessary, he pumps water up into his roof into a great big vat. And then when the solar goes down, he flows that water through a generator. So many generators, and creates energy that way. Has anybody seen anything similar to that?
Yes, but you don't get much of a bang for your buck.
Well, what he's saying, it depends on how many little generators you put in there, and the energy is free anyhow. So what he's saying, peak
Doesn't
times
matter.
when you use the energy anyhow, I pump all this water up to the roof.
Yeah.
And then at night, when I don't get it, I release it, and it turns these little turbines, which will create energy, which is paying back something.
It clearly works. Yeah, because I looked at that just to try and find a way in the winter to try and store more energy in the batteries. But you don't get. Think of it's like a battery. You're storing the energy and then taking it out later, and you don't really, unless you had like like a big reservoir size.
Right.
You're not going to get a whole lot of power out of it when you come back, when you drain it back out.
What if you were to put 2 or 3 of those little turbines in series? So the water runs one turbine, runs another one, then runs another
one. Potentially, but the only way I've seen it, people doing it, are running things more like, the size of a laptop, or powering a laptop or something like that, as opposed to having a real generator, like a water turbine. We could generate enough to power a house, maybe not a house, but charge your battery back up substantially.
Well, I don't know. I just seen it. And he's showing us he was getting a fair amount of voltage out of it. So
I agree. It looks. I thought it was a great idea until I figured how much water I'd have to use.
Yeah, those things are used very commonly in utility scale systems. Especially with hydro plants, where when you've got a big system like wind turbine farm or a big solar farm or a hydro system, and it's going to generate for the entire time the resource is available, but you may not need that energy. So rather than curtail the system, turning it off, you simply then can either use, they have a lot of different ways they can store that energy. Water is one, by raising it to height. That's the more common. There's also flywheel tension systems that can basically, like winding up an old-fashioned alarm clock and release the tension from the flywheel when you need power. There's also compressed air systems that will pump and compress air into a confined space and release it when you need power. Or then there's like that big, Jenga tower type thing, where when they have extra power, they raise these things up onto a tower and then drop them down and harness the energy of this thing from gravity. So those things work on a big scale. I don't know how practical they're going to be. Like Don's saying, on a small scale, you may find it's just a lot cheaper to throw another battery in there and store the power that way.
If you want to see a practical one that I think that's been put in place, our congressman here in town, Thomas Massey, he has one of those set up where he has a pond up way up, maybe it's not a pond, but it's a big water reservoir that he pumps the water up to and then releases it back down. He's also been off the grid for a long time. He's got he took a wrecked Tesla apart and salvaged the batteries to run his system after his first set of batteries kind of died out. If you want to see some innovative stuff, he's, you can like him or hate him, Jay. I'm thinking you might not like him, but
I was thinking you were going to say he's a politician. He's storing up hot air and releasing it.
And for this particular aspect, I think you might like him.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I like people who are consistent in their philosophies, regardless of what.
From my perspective, he's very consistent. I'm not sure you would agree, but I think he's very consistent.
Okay, doke. All right,
a large system tends to have about 85% efficiency on hydroelectric storage. Obviously, the small system has some drawbacks. The question might be whether a cooperative and a community could have their own modest size system that might have efficiency worth looking at.
Yep. Yeah, there have also been discussions, when you talk about like community water systems that are constantly under pressure, couldn't you put micro turbines within the pipes as water is flowing through the system and generate power? The water's already flowing, all the infrastructure's in place. Couldn't you harness some of that energy for systems? So, there's no shortage of ideas about how to generate energy. Question is, are they economic? Are they practical? You know, like one of the issues of putting coolants up with solar thermal and electricity, we already have enough trouble coordinating amongst trades with roofing companies versus solar companies versus landscaping. Now you try and get the plumbers and the electricians to cooperate, and good luck with that. So, you know, that can be another issue, because these are two separate trades, two separate skills. The education pathways in are completely different, you know.
And
So
I suspect that the guy concept was really, how can I store some of those energy so I can use it later instead of having batteries? Just another alternative.
yeah, it's all good. Well, let me jump into the topic I wanted to bring up, because in past sessions, I brought up about storage batteries within your home, within your business. And there was some discussion saying that in the 2021 electrical code, they were going to be prohibiting the storage of batteries within living dwelling structures. That was the discussion. And I searched through all of the development processes for the code and the code itself, and could not find any reference to this. So I was wondering if this was just somebody made it up in a webinar or whatever. Well, I finally found where this stuff is located. And where it is in 2019, there was a new standard called NFPA 855, which governs the standard for the installation of energy storage systems. So 855 essentially outlines how systems are to be dealt with within energy systems, and they do specifically state in this standard that these systems will not be placed in living spaces other than within specially designed utility closets, storage, or utility spaces. So that's where that begins to come from. So this has existed since 2019. Now, when you look at what constitutes these utility storage spaces, they have to have, in some cases, 1 hour firewalls, in other cases, 2 hour firewalls. They have to have ventilation systems. They have to have acid resistant floor. They have to, there are a whole bunch of, they have to be lockable. They have to be, the doorways have to open outwards. You know, so there's a lot of these kind of provisions, access, egress, fire alarm systems. So it's in a commercial building, you can see that that's something that people would be doing sort of as a matter of course, if they had a whole room of batteries or battery storage or an equipment closet of some sort. In a residential, that's not very practical for most people's homes to suddenly have a dedicated storage room that has all of these bells and whistles. In fact, many of them require eye washing facilities and things of that nature. So, so from a practical standpoint, then for residential, and let me share the screen on this one article I had here. Yeah, I found this to be a very good article. Whoops. Did I? Yeah. With this, what they're saying is that the ESS, which stands for Energy Storage System, has to be labeled and marked in accordance with UL 9540. 9540 is a new standard for integrated storage systems, which basically means it has the battery-based inverter and the batteries all sort of listed as a unit. There has to be a minimum of 3 feet between each battery bank, unless the testing shows that they're allowed to be closer than that. They talk about garages, structures. There's a lot of detail in there. The maximum amount of energy of any unit is 20 kilowatt hours. The maximum allowed in a residential structure, either indoors or outdoors, is 80 kilowatt hours of storage, and indoors is 40. So that's kind of interesting because that, you remember the Ford Lightning, it has like a 93 kilowatt hour battery bank in that vehicle.
That was for the lower one. That was
Yeah, that violates right there. You know, according to this standard, you're not allowed to park that in your garage. So that's kind of interesting, although who's going to check on that? Another,
Jay, is this in place? Is this in place or is this to propose? That's,
well,
you
that's,
said 19, that's what I'm confused about.
yeah, that's the thing, is in and of itself, it's nothing until it's adopted by an authority having jurisdiction. So
Mhm.
how does an authority go about adopting that? Well, typically the fire codes that are in existence are primarily contained within the International Residential Code and the International Fire Code. And then there's also the NFPA 1 Fire Code. So 49 states have adopted the International Residential Code. 41 states have adopted the International Fire Code, and 19 states have adopted NFPA 1. This standard is being folded into all three of those in the 2021 cycle. So when a jurisdiction adopts the 2021 version of any of those three fire codes, this goes into effect. So when I was looking through it, there's only a couple of states that have adopted the 2021 codes at this point. Oftentimes there's a several year lag, but where they have adopted it, it becomes the law of the land. So,
And are they distinguishing? It looks like some of this that you're scrolling through says they're distinguishing between chemistries. So
no,
lead
what,
acid versus, okay.
yeah, this thing, what it did is it basically harmonized amongst all, whether it's lead acid, nickel cadmium, lithium ion, all of those are contained now within the 855 code.
Okay.
But some other things here that they're talking about is if you do put them outside, you've got to keep them 3 feet away from any door or window. And then they have to be 3 feet apart from each other, maximum of 80 kilowatts within the garage, at 80 kilowatt hours, maximum of 80 kilowatt hours outdoors if it's mounted on the wall. They did originally say you had to have 3 feet, but then they decided, well, you couldn't have 3 feet and still attach it to the wall. So apparently it's okay, but then the wall has to have certain issues. But the other thing that I found very interesting is this standard does make allowances for using your electric vehicle as a battery backup system for your home, but only on a temporary basis. So you're not allowed to do so for more than 30 days, which I don't quite know where that's coming from or where it's going, but perhaps it's because in 2019, there really was no effective or efficient bidirectional charging station going on between an EV and a home. But, you know, again, with the Ford Lightning, that's something they're promoting. So that whole Ford Lightning promotion would be in violation of this code if it's adopted.
Well, they only seem to say they promoted it as being an emergency matter. We are the ones I think who have talked about using it in real life because the batteries just are darn cheap based on that.
But what qualifies an emergency matter if you have all of the equipment there to hook it up?
I agree. I'm just saying that when you see the ads, they're like, the power is down in the neighborhood, but your lights are on.
Uh-huh. Well, I would claim every time the power goes out, it's an emergency. So, and you hope it's a temporary situation. So
yeah, but for example, I was thinking about using it just as general, you know, in the wintertime, you know, use it as a additional battery storage.
Right. And I guess there's a issue of what is realistic. I mean, nobody's going to come out to your house to see if you plugged your car in versus what is acceptable at time of occupancy or permitting.
Well, Oh, yeah.
But I just find this whole concept of this battery thing is going to become more and more of an issue. And we've seen this with the setbacks on the roofs with solar panels. Those are contained in the International Fire Code. But electrical inspectors typically are not familiar with the International Fire Code. So they're not inspecting for the 3-foot setback from the sides or the peak of the roof. And so you see a lot of violations there. So I'm just wondering how this is going to impact us as more and more people are starting to install systems into their homes and businesses. I know,
They
hey,
have a-
Dennis, you're out installing a lot of systems. Are you guys doing the battery systems much?
I do a lot of the battery systems, and we got the new LG double pack. You know, it's a 2-pack, and it's got a controller on top. And yeah, they're interesting. That's what we're doing now, because they're basically cheaper than what the LGs were. And so, yeah, we're doing those a lot.
Are you
I got
installing them
2 more
inside?
coming up this week.
Are you installing them inside the house or outside on the walls or garage?
It depends, you know. I mean, on the situation. Sometimes there's not a room in the garage, and sometimes we have to install them outside. But we provide a little shed over top of them to shield them, but they don't really need it. I mean, they're totally sealed, so it's not a. It is kind of like the inverters, you know. You can mount an inverter inside, and we try to do them on the north wall so that there's no heat, kind of thing. They're in the shadow and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the issues that we've discussed in the past, and I still, when I looked through, I read through the NFPA 855. And let me just mention to you guys, if you're interested in looking at these systems, I thought I had that up, but I don't. You can go into the NFPA website, and if you register, you can scan through the codes. You can read through all of the different codes for free. You can't copy and paste, but you can look at them like you're scrolling through a virtual book without spending the hundreds of dollars on them to see. But I was looking at this to see if there was any mention of temperature control within these units, because we talked about once they're outside, lithium ion doesn't really charge below freezing.
I've had that problem with the Fronius, and because there was nowhere else to mount them, and the sun comes up and they start heating up and the Fronius throws an error for heat, and I mean it still keeps producing. It's just saying it's hot.
Yeah,
and the fan runs longer. But no, these new battery systems, and the problem is Solar Edge has that new Prism inverter, and you actually have to take a course to get so you can be certified before they will even talk to you about fixing any problem on that inverter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the issue, I know that the inverters will work outside, but the batteries, we talked last week about some of the new lithium ion technologies that are more functional within cold and hot temperatures. But I think we're going to see, once again, I just cannot see us avoiding having some sort of climate controlled casing, whether it's built into the unit itself or it's put into some sort of box that keeps it warm.
This new battery system looks like a mini fridge, and I'd rather set it in a garage. I really would.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't have the room. So we set it outside, you
Yeah.
know, but it's very integral, you know, I mean, it's sealed, it's, you know, sun beam down on it may not, it's silver, you know, it may reflect, you know, 50%, whatever, you know, doesn't absorb, doesn't reflect, you know.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
but if they just put a little thing over it, it probably wouldn't even notice.
Yep. Well, I'm not worried about the heat. I'm worried more about the cold on these things. So I think gone are the days that we could stick our battery banks down next to the furnace in the basement, and which is where I see most of them when I go out there. You know, it's like the worst place you can install them. It's like, so. So
Minus
Don,
30 degrees, come on, these are lithium ion batteries. Yeah, the cold is not affecting them.
well, it does. It actually does, not in the producing of the power that's already in them, but in their ability to charge. Most of the lithium ions will not charge if the temperature gets below freezing. So they really have significantly diminished capacity when they are cold, you know, as far as how they can absorb a charge. So I know that they're coming out with those new technologies within lithium that will do better, but it's still not 100%. So Don, where did you install all your batteries? Are they in next to your bed, you know?
Not quite. The big lead acid, or the carbon, whatever, the matte ones that are in the basement. Probably, I just put a new furnace in down there, so they're probably 20 feet from that. The other ones, lithium ion ones, I've got in the basement, probably 10, 15 feet from the furnace. But none of them are outside. I was just curious, did they seem to have an ultimate limit on how much battery power you could have in the house, because they have an outside limit and an inside limit?
Yes.
Is there any justification? If I want to put a giant battery, 400 watt hour battery out there, what's the justification for not letting me do that? I mean,
well, these guys typically don't tell you what their justification is, but you're right. It basically says, and it doesn't limit this to residential. 80 kilowatt hours is the limit that can be installed at the facility. And that's indoor or outdoor. I mean, indoor, it's limited to 40, outdoor limited to 80.
I've got twice that in this house right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know what.
You live in Kentucky. You live in Kentucky. You don't have no stinking.
We don't.
Right?
The only code that I'm imposed on is that they told me I couldn't have a septic tank without an approval. Other than that, there's no electric, no plumbing, no nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I suspect the same rationale that I also suspect went into the 600 volt limit on solar panels is this was a first go round, and they just said, you know what, we're comfortable up to this limit. There were very few products on the market that would have exceeded that in 2019. Now we're starting to see some that will. And I suspect that is going to go away, has to go away at some stage. So.
Jay, I have a question. That standard, is it peculiar to grid tie systems with backup, or is it applicable to fully off-grid systems as well?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Fully off-grid systems might be like me. I mean, fully off-grid means you're typically not within the jurisdiction of a municipality. I mean, you could be, but usually you're kind of out where there's.
All right.
Jay, you probably don't have any, code restrictions where you are either, to be honest. Yeah.
No, when we built our house, basically the only code, and I think it's still the case, is the plumbing code, where they wanted to come and inspect the plumbing. There was no structural, there's no electrical, there's no anything. And I know our code actually said, had nothing to do with well, it said it had to stub out to a septic tank, but it
Mhm.
didn't actually say that you had to install a septic tank. So it's kind of interesting that way. And the way the guy inspected it, he's drove up and he had a piece of paper that was a rectangle. And he said, if this is your house, where does the stub come out of your house? And we pointed to the rectangle. He said, okay, that's it. I'm out of here, and he took off. He never got out of his car. That was the entire inspection for plumbing. So
An efficient government.
that's right.
Not every county in Kentucky is so free of structural zoning or structural inspections and so forth.
No, they're
In my
not.
county, they're getting ready to implement the solar regulations, and the planning and zoning guy told me if I went ahead and ordered my panels, I'd be in construction and I wouldn't have to worry about any of the new code coming in. So I'm getting ready to order in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Was that in Knott or Knox, did you say?
No, I said in Kentucky. I'm in Mercer County.
Okay.
Well, you run into certain, every inspector is going to be different and how they're going to interpret these things is different. So it'll be interesting. I know, talking about inspectors, we were talking about Eduardo before this came forward, and he was telling me he was doing a big commercial system. And when the inspector showed up, they met down in the parking lot and the guy just said, so boys, everything looked good up there on the roof? And he goes, oh, yes, sir. And he goes, okay, where do I sign? And that was basically the entire inspection because he didn't want to get up on the roof. So,
That's
I
not
noticed
unusual.
I
yeah,
noticed that the 2020 NEC code specifies that the PV system shall be installed by a qualified person. It
Yeah.
doesn't specify whether it's an electrical, a licensed electrician or whatever. So I wonder how they're going to interpret it in my county or my state.
yeah. The qualified is an interesting term, and that's something that I deal with a lot because it deals with licensure and certification, things of that nature. Some states require that you have a master electrician on hand on site, like in Minnesota. I know they have that requirement. Other states, it's the wild, wild west. If you can pick up a wrench, I guess you're qualified. So we're slowly moving in some sort of direction, but where that ends up, I think it'll be towards more regulation as opposed to towards less. So NABCEP, for instance, is one certification within the industry. ETA is another certification within the industry. We just ran into an interesting situation in Illinois where Illinois just passed a law for renewable energy. And they said that in order to qualify for all the grants and incentives, you must be an ETA certified level 3 technician. Well, there is no ETA level 3. And they just sort of pulled that out of thin air. And so I was talking to our guy in Illinois, and I think what we've decided is we're going to put together a little addendum test for people living in Illinois to ask them a few questions about what this legislation is all about. And then we'll give them a level 3 certification addendum to their level 1 certification, because we decided to try and get the state to change their terminology was just going to be absolutely horrendous, but ETA can change. And so I think for Illinois residents only, we're going to have a level 3 certification. Unless you want, you can get it if you're going to do work in Illinois, but but I'm just a little worried people will think there's a 3rd level now up and above level 2, which, but.
We just had a situation in Miami up here where there's a gas station wanting to put solar panels on top of the pump stations on the roof. And they've done it in Indiana with no issues, but Miami County is kind of rural. But they wanted all this engineering done to make sure that they can handle the load of the solar panels, the rackings, and And this company owns like 740 gas stations nationwide. And they said they would not step foot back in Ohio to handle, to deal with a lot of the stuff that they were doing here in this one county.
Yep. Yeah, it can be very frustrating. I know I talk with people from other countries and they're just amazed at the mess that we have as far as governmental oversight when you talk about all the different jurisdictions and the variation amongst states and things of that nature. All right, well,
Speaking of that, Jay, one thing, speaking of that, George, when you get your inspection, I don't know if you're aware of it, but in Kentucky, electrical inspectors are not government authorities. They're individuals who take a test to be the electrical inspector. So if you're wondering how they're going to interpret it, you might talk to whoever you're going to hire first, just to see how they, there's a little bit of competition there. You can
sure.
Pick your
We just
inspector.
we have one guy in our county who was here for years. Now he's been replaced by someone else, and it's pretty well one person. I don't think they
Okay.
use a variety of different people from time to time. I'm
Well-
going to try to get around him if I can, at least get on his good side. I do have a question about you, from if I can harvest any information. What is the size of a tracking system array? Commercial size tracking system array. How many panels by how many panels, and what?
I don't know that there's a standard there. I think it depends on whatever tracking system you end up buying. There's small tracking systems and there's mega large tracking systems. I don't know. Has anybody installed a tracking system? Dennis, I see you trying to talk. Have you installed a tracking system at all? Wait for Dennis to unmute. I was just doing some research on the tracking systems and really I haven't run into anything as far as size constraints. There are some issues around, do they have to be on absolutely level ground versus slopes, things of that nature, or undulating, how do you deal with uneven ground? Because you'll either can set the poles at different heights, which can cause some strain, from wind, or do you have an articulating type, which can cause strain as these things shift down slopes, things like that.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're good. Have you got any
Okay.
info?
Don't you remember the first course I went through with you? And we went over to the guy at ETA's house, and he built his own tracking system
Mhm.
with windshield washer.
Yeah.
waterproof.
Yeah, he had a
Yeah.
car alarm that would go off and
He had
set the
those
motor going.
posts and so tracking systems aren't that hard.
Yeah, well, they're a mechanical device again. Well, George, what's your reason for asking?
Well, I got into a conversation with our local county judge executive, and we were discussing how one could utilize solar on land that was otherwise not productive. Because a big fight in our county is taking agricultural land out of usage. We've got 24 acres of contaminated land that's good for nothing else, and never will be unless they haul the dirt away. That would produce about 4 to 5 megawatts. But going around about a fourth of our county, a fourth of our city, is a bypass that's recently constructed. It's got somewhat of a narrow medium, which is kind of gravel, no shade trees, about 2.2 miles long. At the end of it is Corning, which is a good company that uses a lot of resistive energy in their furnaces. And we'd dearly love to keep it there. It's a national treasure, actually. Well, I said, well, why don't we put solar panels all around that 2.2 miles of median? They do it in Europe. And then I went over and looked at it, and it's too narrow for setting arrays. I said, well, to myself, we're going to have to put in tracking arrays. They fit on poles. We can put guardrails up the side, run it for 2.2 miles. Well, how many can I put in? How much energy could I produce? The only thing going for us is the new infrastructure bill, the lieutenant governors from our county, and the newly appointed deputy director of critical infrastructure for the state is our county executive who retired about 2 months ago and went to that job. So we've got a little bit of leeway with the state. We've got a big generating company at E.W. Brown, which is about 3 or 4 miles away, 6 at most. So, we've got some of the elements of the infrastructure to put in a novel system.
Sure.
To put it in, it's going to have to be probably a tracking system, and because of the narrowness of the median. But that's okay.
I think what you'll find is you'll be able to find a system that will fit almost every situation. There's lots of them. My only concern there is typically these things are oriented along cardinal directions. So you would have like an east-west tracking system, north-south tracking system, and your roadway probably does not run in a perfect straight line, I would assume.
It runs straight, but it runs in a gentle arc.
Yeah.
So you go straight one way, and then you turn a little bit the other way. So you got to add a little bit of spacing in there because of shading issues, or you got to,
Why
go up
not?
and down. There's not much grade, but there's that gentle arc. But it's 2.2 miles. So you've got room to, gently turn that direction. Go ahead.
Why not use it to power your water and sewer system?
Well, there's many things that could be done in the community. We've got Corning, which uses a lot of electricity. We'd like to sell them cheap energy. We got a concrete plant right directly at the end of the road.
You sell the excess energy, but I'm just saying.
We'd like to
Why
develop.
not make your community?
Okay.
But-
I'm going to have to cut us off right here, though, because we're right at the end of our time. But I think you'll find that there's a solution to almost everything. As I always say, you can do it. Question is, can you do it affordably? And
Yes, sir.
that's going to be the big issue there. Plus, anytime you stick anything next to the road, somebody's going to hit it with their car. So that's another
what the
thing to
guardrails
worry
are for.
about.
Got to put them
So,
in.
all right. Okay. Well, we'll
You're
cut it
damn
off
right.
here, and I'll see you guys all next week. Same place, same time. All right. And Bob, welcome back to Illinois. So see you.
From you, Bob.
Love you, brother.
Bye-bye.